What's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning in once again. This is going to be part one of the group of 5 episodes with Liam Blutman. In this episode, we are going to be covering the AAC, Conference USA, and the MAC, MACtion. There's nobody out there that knows more about these group of 5 teams and players than Liam Blutman, so it was so great to have him on. If you're a real college football fan, real college football gambler, you're going to learn a ton from this episode and part 2 coming later in the week. So make sure to check it out. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, follow me, follow Liam, and enjoy. All right, I'd now like to welcome on a very special guest for the Group of 5 episode. It is Liam Blutman. He is the co-founder of the Transfer Portal, who just put out a really awesome magazine that I purchased, that I used while doing the research for this. So I'm really excited to talk to you. Thanks for coming on.
Well, first off, thank you for purchasing the magazine. If anyone is listening who has purchased it, thank you for buying that and supporting us. Really appreciate it. Thank you for having me on, Blake, ready to talk some group of 5 and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, so I was maybe going to talk about this at the end, but decided since I'm going to be kind of going through the magazine to just talk about it off the top. So did you start NoContextCFB, the account, or did you kind of just end up taking it over at some point?
Taking it over, someone else had approached me the summer of 2018 about like, yo, do you know what these no context accounts are? Like, here's a few examples. I'm just honest, I don't have a clue what he's talking about. But he goes on to say, I want to make college football one. And I'm like, okay, I'm the right person. I watch more college football than anyone, I think. So I got involved that way. And then I would say like 2019, 2020 is really when I took over sole control of the account. And it's been quite the journey.
Yeah, because it's a huge account. And then when did you decide to kind of start the transfer portal and do that? Was that more just to do like be able to make real content other than just memes, basically?
Yeah, I mean, I think it gets tiring just like tweeting memes and stuff and being like, I love being a goofball. That's what I've been for my entire life and everything.
Yeah.
But I still want to be serious. Like, I've done NFL draft stuff. I've done college football writing. I've been writing for years and years. And like, we're in that social media era now. Everyone has a podcast, essentially. Everyone gets to go out there on YouTube and, do this, right? And actually talk about the sport and the sports that they love and be taken more seriously. So that's something that I want to do. A group of people that I knew from Twitter were also looking to get involved with it. We created the Transfer Portal CFB and found it, launched in like August of 2021 or July of 2021, one of the 2 months out. I don't remember exactly, but put a heavy emphasis on spreading out content and not just being so catered to the Alabamas, the Georgias, the Ohio States of the world. It was very important for all of us, and that was very good for me to find other people who wanted to give spotlight to the Conference USA, to the UMasses of the world, the people that the Sickos Committee have helped popularize.
Oh, yeah.
Again, an emphasis on that is super important, but it's not just the teams, it's the players. Because growing up, I'm watching Khalil Mack at Buffalo on a MACtion weeknight, and nobody that's my age at that time understands why I'm watching the MAC, why I'm watching Buffalo. A kid my age shouldn't have been doing that. Should have been watching World Series or should have been watching MLB playoffs, should have been like going outside or something. I don't know. I was watching the MAC. I was seeing Khalil Mack, just an absolute terror, just a tremendous talent. Nobody's talking about him, though. Nobody's really talking about him. Same thing with Damian Lillard at Weber State. So, those two guys kind of helped fuel the fire for what I wanted to cover in sports. And yeah, so this has helped me do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, that's why, because I initially reached out to you to do the Pac-12 preview, because I know you're a West Coast UCLA guy. So I was like, oh, that'd be nice. But then you kind of were like, oh yeah, I'll really talk about anything. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, yeah, I feel like there's not really anybody I could talk to that probably knows more about like these group of five teams and some of these teams that like national media doesn't really cover. And at the end of the day, like you said, this is what the I mean, now it is because of Sicko's committee. Like it really is like kind of how I think of it now, like the college football sickos. Like this is really like
Yeah.
the good stuff, like the teams that we love, like the Billy Napier ULL teams and like App State, these Fun Belt teams, like Tulane last year. Like those are the teams that like the real college football fans love to watch and see these stories kind of come out of nowhere. So yeah, I'm excited to get into it. And I guess we should so we're going to go through every single conference, the group of five and the independents as well, and kind of talk big picture. And we're not going to be able to go too in depth because we're going to be covering five different conferences, but kind of looking at the teams at the top of the conference and talking about who we think can take it, and then a surprise team that could maybe is sitting at the middle of the pack in terms of like the odds or the win totals, but could come up and contend for the conference. And then definitely players, because like you said, there are these guys like Khalil Mack, who's now been one of the best players in the NFL for a decade or whatever, and that going into that season people didn't know who he was, and then he comes out of nowhere. And like those guys are all over these conferences that people are going to know about in the NFL in the next
Yeah.
few years, or even guys that end up transferring, especially how that's going these days, to bigger schools. And uh, so let's start with the AAC. AAC's in a really interesting spot this year. Obviously, they more than any other conference have had a ton of turnover. They had UCF, Cincinnati, and Houston all leave, who finished second, third, and fifth in the conference last year. So that obviously makes a huge difference. But the defending champs are Tulane. They were one of the most exciting teams in college football last year. They beat USC in the Cotton Bowl in what was maybe the best non-college football playoff bowl game of the year. It was an amazing game. And they've added a ton of teams: Charlotte, FAU, North Texas, Rice, UAB, and UTSA all come in. And UTSA won Conference USA last year, so they have two conference champions in Tulane and UTSA in this conference. So a lot of people are saying the conference is going to be worse without UCF, Cincy, and Houston, and it may take away some of the like bigger names. Obviously, Cincy being the only group of five team that made a college football playoff, and UCF, how good they've been the last few years. But I think it like top to bottom is going to be more competitive. They added so many teams that have had great programs like UAB and UTSA, FAU, like even North Texas, these teams that have been really fun. So just kind of what are your thoughts on how the conference is going to look with all these teams that have switched up, and how that's going to look at without UCF, Cincy, Houston, those teams?
I mean, the conference is still gonna move on forward. There's not really anything that you could really do, right? You still just gotta make that charge forward, keep going in the right direction, and you do that. Like UTSA Pickett, UTSA is tremendous. That's a program that is truly become a fan favorite amongst college football like fans, whether it be because they're called the Roadrunners and it's going to say meet me or whatever, because Trailer has put out a very exciting brand of football the last few years, like in a booming Texas market too. Like gang UTSA is so strong, and San Antonio's recruiting scene. I know like UTSA has a heavy emphasis on keeping those kids home, like they did with Sincere McCormick, Rashad Wisdom, a few other guys. UTSA is going to get a lot of talent to stay. They're going to be a mainstay in the AAC, and it's going to be really fun to watch. I think the conference is still like chilling though. Like I know you lose four significant pieces of your puzzle, but it shouldn't be looked at as that bad. It's hard. How am I trying to say this? It's like a good thing for the AAC that they gave those four programs a platform essentially and helped boost them up into the Big 12. And that gives That's a bit of a blueprint for other teams that might want to follow that same footprint, right?
Yeah,
So I think, yeah, I think that's good. I think, UTSA, maybe FAU. I know they're in another recruiting hotbed that can make some stuff happen, but I mean, it's a heck of a conference, even though there's some bottom feeders like Charlotte and South Florida. Ugh.
yeah. I mean, when you look at the top few teams of like Tulane, SMU, UTSA, Memphis, FAU, North Texas, ECU, and Navy, like that top eight is like awesome of teams to watch and programs that have been pretty successful, like ECU and FAU, Memphis. Like all these schools have had like great teams over the last 10 years at different times. And if they can all, yeah, kind of pick up some of the recruiting that these other schools have left behind. And yeah, it's basically given a blueprint for how you can be a player that comes to one of these schools and goes to a Cincinnati type school. And then next thing you know, you're the defensive rookie of the year in the NFL a couple years later. And so in terms of the conference this year, Tulane is the favorite to repeat as champions. They are bringing back Michael Pratt, their quarterback, but obviously they lost Tyjae Spears, who's one of the most exciting players in college football last year. And I think that will make a big difference. Pratt was really good last year, and I think he is a good quarterback, but I think that run game helped him so much be able to kind of do what he did and helped him be successful. And so I'm not totally convinced in them repeating. If I was to make my pick, which I am right now, I would actually be picking UTSA to win the conference. I think Frank Harris is going to be the best quarterback in that conference. And what he did last year at UTSA, winning Conference USA, was awesome. And people kind of doubted them, including myself. I know for a fact I bet against them in the Conference USA championship game and just kind of thought that they'd maybe been a bit overrated all year, and their offense was just ridiculous. And they bring a lot back from that offense. And yeah, I think because they came from a lower conference, they're maybe being like a little underrated, being like having longer odds than SMU, for example, to win the conference. So that's my pick I'm going with. Who do you have?
Well, I just want to bounce off UTSA there and just say, like, it's such a joke that people would look at this and see them move up in conference and perceive them to be not maybe be able to compete at that high level. Like, what are we doing, man? They gave Houston a run for their money last year. They compete with. I mean, they're going to play at Tennessee this year. Texas was a close game for a while. They've played tough opponents in years past, and where they've really fallen short is at the end of the season. That's where they've fallen short in bowl season. We don't have to worry about that here in a conference, in the regular season and all that. But I think people are going to look at Sakari Franklin transferring out and kind of be wary of investing into their offense, which is also just such a joke because Joshua Cephas is fantastic. DeCorian Clark is the best receiver on that team, probably the best receiver in all the AAC. DeCorian Clark is an absolute monster. What he's able to do, and he's coming off an ACL injury and everything, but he'll be good. He'll be healthy. Frank Harris loves throwing that dude absolute dimes, bucket balls, and in the back of the end zone to the sideline. They're going to be good. Kavorian Barnes, excellent player. You get a healthy Rashad Wisdom back. That's going to be a good team. And I'm also fading Tulane. I'm also not going with UTSA. I'm sorry. But there's a team in this conference that they don't have to worry about playing Tulane in the regular season. They don't have to worry about playing UTSA in the regular season. We'll catch one of you in the conference championship game. It's SMU. They have two road tests with Oklahoma and TCU. That'll help them. I love that. I love that in the non-conference schedule. That's something I always look for. Just scheduling tough opponents, and you're probably going to lose the games, even though we've seen SMU beat TCU in years past. Like the expectation is you will lose. Again, though, it won't shock us if they even beat TCU, of course, made a national championship last year, but you learn so much from those games, and that's so important for a group of 5 program that is just looking to, find identity and run with it, and find momentum and run with it. And SMU could do that. You learn so much from those games, and if you look at their schedule, man, they they don't have Tulane, they don't have UTSA. There's a lot of winnable games, and I mean, like, look at their schedule. Louisiana Tech's their opener, they're probably gonna win that. You have Prairie View A&M in the week 3, Charlotte. You're at East Carolina, at Temple. Like, I mean, the East Carolina one maybe might be a bit of a trap. Temple on a Friday night really doesn't worry me. Maybe it should. Tulsa, I think, is a gimme. At Rice, you're probably gonna win. I think you beat North Texas at home. At Memphis is probably at Memphis is their toughest game in the AAC. That's week 11, and then you're at home against Navy. Like, again, on top of the Oklahoma and TCU games, their schedule is so favorable. And they have Preston Stone at quarterback, who breaks his collarbone last year. He stole the QB1 job for the Mustangs straight from Tanner Mordecai, who transfers to Wisconsin. And all of a sudden, Mordecai is like everybody's favorite under the radar quarterback, and it blows my mind. If you watch Preston Stone, he's 100 times better than Mordecai. Preston Stone's ball placement's immaculate. He has extreme confidence in his abilities. He makes excellent throws downfield. There's no shortage of talent with that kid. If he doesn't get hurt last year, I don't know what we're talking about. When we're like, I don't know where Tanner Mordecai is in his career if Preston Stone didn't get hurt last year. I truly don't know where he is. Jordan Curley's a fantastic receiver. Jalen Knighton, Coach Lashley can't stop speaking highly of Jalen Knighton. Just they're loaded with talent, man. Elijah Chapman's really good in their defensive interior. I like SMU as the pick because of their schedule, because of Preston Stone.
No, I don't mind. I think both of us have the right idea in going against Tulane. I think that there's just because they were such a fun team, such an awesome team last year, they're getting a little bit too much hype and a little too much I don't think they're a level
favorite bias.
Yeah, I don't think they're a level above these 2 teams that we've picked. And I agree with the scheduling thing. They do have a really easy road. Like UTSA is going to have to go to Tulane the last week of the season, and that does scare me. That could be potentially a game that decides which of those 2 teams gets in, and having to go to Tulane on the road. But you kind of mentioned, and this is a thing I'm sure we'll talk about more as we go through all these conferences, is I do really like these teams that play tougher out of conference schedules early in the season. And that was part of my thinking with UTSA going to Houston, the first game of the season. That should be a really good test. Playing Army early in the season is like, we're okay with just like, you could schedule a team as good as Army that would not be basically putting yourself through like a physical beating the entire game. And scheduling Army out of conference is basically just saying, like, you don't really care. You want to play tough teams and you want to just kind of go for it. And then they're going to be going to Tennessee the next week. So I think they should be really battle tested by the time they get towards the end of the season. So yeah, I think going with either of those teams, you can't really go wrong. And I think hopefully for us, those 2 teams play each other in the conference championship, and then we'll see what happens. That would be a great game. But talking about some other teams in the conference, I think one really interesting team that I've kind of put down as my surprise team, not that I don't think they'll be able to compete with those kind of top 3 teams we've been talking about to win the conference, but a team that I think could be really interesting is FAU. It is obviously the big story is Tom Herman making his return to head coaching. It's been a wild ride for Tom Herman since we last saw him at Texas. He's been in the news for some really interesting things at different times, but you can't deny that he's shown he can be a really good college football coach and a really good recruiter. And he's going to be in an area where he's going to be able to recruit really good talent in Florida and in that Boca area. And we've seen coaches, obviously, Lane Kiffin in the Joey Freshwater days. Like we've seen coaches kind of go there. And I mean, that's kind of how Lane rehabilitated his image. He was kind of in the same spot that Tom Herman is now, where he had kind of become a bit of a joke in college football after failing a couple places. Then he goes to FAU and really succeeds, and then gets this Ole Miss job where he's obviously now pretty widely agreed upon as one of the best offensive minds in all of college football, and still kind of a meme at times, but in a way that people love him and respect him as a coach. So I think they could be a really interesting team. I think with a first year head coach, you always kind of have to be a little bit wary. They have brand new coordinators as well. So I'm not saying that they're going to be able to win the conference or maybe beat some of those top teams, but they have two really favorable games to start the year against Monmouth and Ohio, both at home. And then they go at Clemson. So that's another one of those games at Clemson and at Illinois, actually, back-to-back weeks after that. So they kind of have a couple games to get their feet under them, and then are really going to get tested. And then don't have the toughest schedule the rest of the way. They play Tulane, but it's at home. But then they avoid SMU, and they avoid or then they also have UTSA at home. So they have a couple games that I could definitely see them taking. And then obviously another big thing is that they did get Casey Thompson at QB from Nebraska. And I don't know, it's almost hard to really evaluate Casey Thompson's season last year because Nebraska just had, it was such a Nebraska season, and losing your coach halfway through. And I still think that he's pretty talented. So I don't know. What do you think about this FAU team?
I mean, I think when we're talking about the schedule, like, yeah, Clemson and Illinois are there, but how about the Ohio game too? That's still a really good test, and it's another group of five opponent where you're going up against one of the best quarterbacks in the group of five in Curtis Rourke, albeit coming off injury, but that's a really good test. You're going up against one of the best. Your secondary is being tested by Sam Wiglusz, who's one of the best receivers in the group of five, and they have C.A. Banguero, who's one of the best group of five running backs. It's still a really good test for FAU. I wouldn't call that game a gimme. I think it's going to be an incredible game to watch, and it's a really good test for FAU, regardless of where they win or lose. Man, I don't know what to think of Casey Thompson. I really don't, dude. I'm just gonna be blunt. I'll see how he fares early on in the season. I'm gonna be locked into that matchup versus Ohio, and I mean, we'll see what happens. Going up against Torrey Cox too. Torrey Cox Jr. is one of the better DBs in the group of five. Like, that Ohio team's really good. We'll talk about them later, but yeah, I mean, I'm excited to watch FAU. I don't think I'm as excited as others, though. I mean, like, Larry McCammon's really fun running back too. Like, they have a fun offense that we'll definitely see on display. But man, I don't know. We'll see. Wester's a really fun player, and I don't know. I'm just higher on the other teams, I guess.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Larry McCammon, who actually I can kind of jump ahead. I put him down as my player to watch from this conference. I don't think he's the best player. Obviously, we talked about Frank Harris. Like, there are guys that everybody knows are going to be really good, but I think he is a more under the radar guy that I think is probably going to have some pretty ridiculous highlights. And if this team can click a little bit, and like you said, if Casey Thompson can kind of be not even the guy, but kind of what this team needs,
he just needs to be better than competent.
Yeah, then I think that the offense could be pretty exciting to watch. But who did you have as your kind of surprise team or team to watch?
Yeah, so the last time that Navy competed without Ken Niumatalolo was on their staff was in 2001, and they went 0-10. So might not be the best omen for this pick. I think Navy is going to be my surprising team here in their first year under Brian Newberry. There's a few reasons why. I mean, I like looking at it like this. You should never look at previous seasons, season by season results when you're looking at an academy team, because you could just boom out of absolutely nowhere. And I feel like after a few failing, losing seasons, Navy could overcome that. They have loads of experience. They have two very capable quarterbacks, right? In Airline and Lavatai. And you're gonna see a different approach on their offense now, as there's going to be a little more of the shotgun involved. It's very different from what we've seen from academy teams in the Navy. This is Chestnut coming from Kennesaw State. I don't know. Our guy Dan, our season preview, wrote that 2/3 of it is brand new to everyone. They took 5 weeks and built an offensive plan out, so it's going to be very new and interesting. I think experience wins over, though. Having two very capable quarterbacks, one's going to figure it out and run with it. And when you look at the schedule, I like it. You have South Florida at home, North Texas at home. You go at Charlotte. Charlotte's just not it, dude. At Temple, UAB, I don't know what the heck to expect from UAB in the Dilfer era. I'm not expecting big things. I still can't believe that happened. You get East Carolina at SMU. I think that there's a lot of very winnable games there, and not to like jump ahead. I think the number of what was their win total? 5.5. I think that's too low.
Yeah, it's 5.5.
Yeah, I think that's much too low.
Yeah, I actually am, and again, we'll get to these later, but I'm actually high on all three of the service academies this year. I think all three of them could be really interesting teams. And I think I like this Navy team. I think they would go over that 5.5 wins. Could be interesting if Army and Navy are both sitting on 5 wins going into that last game, and that 6th win will decide who goes to a bowl. But hopefully they're both even better than that. I like that pick. I think they should be a really fun team to watch, and I think that the Notre Dame game is week 0, right? That's not week 1.
Yeah, in Ireland.
Yeah, that should be, I think, maybe a more interesting game than people would think. I think that spread is like 20 right now. I think Navy could keep that game close. We'll talk about Notre Dame when we get to Independence, but I think that could actually be a pretty interesting game. But my win total that I was going to pick is actually the over on USF, over 4 wins, and this one could end up totally haunting me because there is a scenario where things just like go terribly wrong there, and they win. Like, I guess they really only have one real gimme, Florida A&M, on the schedule. But at UConn is a winnable game. At home against Charlotte is a winnable game. I guess Alabama, that's not a winnable game. At home against Rice is a winnable game. I do think that if everything goes right for them, they could have easily 4 wins on that schedule. And yeah, I mean, I think this conference, even at UAB and at home against Temple, like those are all winnable games for them. Because like you said, I'm not a UAB believer. I'm not a believer in the Dilfer hire. Obviously things didn't really go well for Jerry Bohannon last year, but the team was so bad, and I think bringing in a great offensive mind, which they did. Alex Galesh as their new head coach, who was the offensive coordinator at Tennessee last year. I don't think Jerry Bohannon's going to be like a stud, but I think he could be a totally competent quarterback in the right system. And they brought in, which I think was a good hire, even though he has maybe struggled the last couple of years, Todd Orlando at DC. He's been the defensive coordinator Texas and USC. So he obviously has done things right in his career to get to this point. So it's a little bit risky because there is a scenario where they just totally fail. But I think if everything clicks for them, then they could actually be a sneaky, exciting team to watch in that conference.
Yeah, I hope that Golish, who I'm a massive fan of, I hope that he's able to instill a culture very early on and just like provide hope for 2024 and get things rolling a bit. I mean, that's the goal. Like, they're probably not going to make a bowl game. Maybe they do and they shock me, but as long as he's able to build that foundation and instill a lot of hope for that fan base going into next season, I think year one's a success. And I can't wait to see what he does with more of his guys and a bigger influx of talent next fall. For my win total, I'm actually going back to Tulane. I'm going under 9.5 wins. When you look at the schedule, man, this is all about the schedule. That schedule is not easy at all. And I think when we're talking about South Alabama week 1, that is in no way, shape, or form a gimme. That South Alabama team is loaded top to bottom. You could be looking at an 0-2 start for Tulane if they lose to South Alabama and then they lose to Ole Miss. Like, they're 0-2 right off the bat. You're telling me they're gonna win out after that and my win total's cooked? That's tough to believe. They're still at Southern Miss, that's not a gimme. Southern Miss ain't like flashy or anything. They're not the class of the Sun Belt in any way, shape, or form, but still a very competent football team with the run the ball identity, with a great running back in Frank Gore Jr. And they've got, Jay Stanley. Like, they've got good pieces. Like, those first 3 games are not easy at all. And then you're still at Memphis on a Friday in week 6. You're at FAU week 11, and then you're hosting UTSA in week 12. I think that there's enough games on Tulane's schedule to make you sit back for a second and ponder if they get to 10 wins. Like, I feel like 9.5 wins is a fair enough bet on the under. I really do. I just think it's a fair shot to take with that tough schedule.
No, I like that pick. Like we said from the beginning, talking about this conference, this is a team that we both kind of agree on that we're going to kind of go against. Even at ECU, we've seen much weirder things happen at ECU than Tulane drop in a game. So
and when we look at Tulane, for example, 2021 was terrible. 2022 was a dream season. Like, how quick that switch could like, flip and turn on, the same, it could revert. Like, there could definitely be regression here. I don't know if it's going to be seismic to where it's like a 7-win season, but 8-9 wins is very much realistic.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just way too much stock is being put into what they did last year. But unless you have anything else on the AAC, we can move on to
I could give a player to watch. I kind of touched on DeCorian Clark already, so I'll try and go with someone else. Let me think of someone. Okay, you know what? I'll go with Tulsa, man. I'll go with Braylon Braxton on a really bad Tulsa team that's going to have an uphill struggle all season long. Find joy in watching quarterback Braylon Braxton and his exciting dual threat capabilities and big time arm. I just have fun watching Braylon Braxton play, because he's going to be pretty much the lone baller on this team. Him and Darren Ray. Like, that team's not going to be good. Braylon Braxton's going to be a joy to watch, though.
Yeah, no, I like that. There's a lot of honestly a lot of fun offenses in this conference that could be exciting games to watch, even if the teams aren't that great. But moving on to Conference USA, the favorite to win Conference USA is Western Kentucky. It's another team that has had a little bit of a shakeup. They added Liberty, New Mexico State, Jacksonville State from FCS, and Sam Houston from FCS. So 2 teams coming up. And then Liberty, New Mexico State was independent last year, right?
Yes.
Yeah, both those teams were independent. And Liberty is kind of a unique case. A lot of these teams you see kind of come in like that are kind of lower on the odds board, whereas Liberty is the second favorite to win the conference, coming in from independent. So it's an interesting conference. It's a conference I definitely think of kind of two halves of the conference. You kind of have a top five teams from Western Kentucky, Liberty, Middle Tennessee, Louisiana Tech, and UTEP that are kind of more competitive teams, and then New Mexico State, Florida International, and then those two teams, Jacksonville State and Sam Houston, that came up from FCS that are more like a pretty significant step down, I would say, from those top five teams in terms of talent level. So, but I do think with those top five teams that they could all be really interesting. Austin Reed, the quarterback at Western Kentucky, is definitely one of the best, if not the best, quarterback in the group of five. So they're a really exciting team. The defending champions of this conference obviously are UTSA, who are gone. So it's kind of wide open for these teams to come in and try to steal it. There's a lot of love around Liberty, obviously bringing in Jamie Chadwell from Coastal Carolina, who kind of built Coastal into not only successful, but one of like the fan favorite programs in all of college football. And Liberty is going to be a much harder brand to kind of make a fan favorite. People kind of naturally don't like Liberty for off the field stuff that's gone on at that school, but you can't deny how good of a coach he is and how good he's been at kind of building a program. And in this case, he's not even really starting from scratch. Like, they've been really successful in recent years with Hugh Freeze. And so I think it's going to be really interesting. But at the end of the day, I am picking Western Kentucky. This is the conference that I am going with the favorite. I think that what they have at quarterback is just kind of next level with Austin Reed. And I think they've kind of been building up over the last couple of years since they joined this conference. And I think what Ty Helton's been doing is really awesome. And I think they're going to make a big move this year, and they're going to end up winning the conference. I think when you look at them, they're another team, like we keep talking about. They play Ohio State at Ohio State week 3. And I think that's the type of game that having a quarterback like this, that I think is an NFL caliber quarterback, going up against a defense with NFL caliber players in Ohio State will do really good things for Austin Reed going into the rest of the season. And they do get Liberty at home, which I think is huge for them. And then other than that, schedule is really not tough. When you look at the second half of their season, they have Jacksonville State, Liberty at home. At UTEP will be a tough game, but I still think they would win that. And then New Mexico State at home, Sam Houston at home, FIU is their second half of the season. So after kind of that early test out of conference, South Florida could be a test for sure out of conference week 1, and at Ohio State. But then I think they'll be in really good shape the rest of the way. And I think their offense is gonna be awesome. And I think really if they go 11-1 with their only loss being Ohio State, they have potential to be a New Year's 6 pick out of these group of 5 teams. So what do you think about Western Kentucky and who's winning this conference?
Yeah, so first off, just want to point out that schedule where it is in Conference USA play. It's a little more low in the front and nothing much in the back. And that's just because the Conference USA did an incredible job of scheduling weeknight games. It doesn't interfere with matching or anything. It's weeknight fall games. It's just Conference USA on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. A few Thursday ones mixed in there, like, WKU, MTSU. It's high-level football of their best teams playing each other. I think that they did an extraordinary job doing that. They're showcasing really good games, a lot of good talent. So I'm very glad that they did that. Western Kentucky is going to be, their offense is going to be on full display. They are my pick to win the Conference USA in an absolute rout. I think this is by far the best team in the conference. I mean, no disrespect to Liberty or MTSU or Louisiana Tech or anybody else. This is just far and away the best team in the conference. I think if they were in the AAC, they would win that conference as well. I think it's the best team in all the group of five, like you said. New Year's Six potential, I agree with that. I think that this team very well could go 11-1. There's just one problem when I look at the schedule that trips me up. It's you're at Ohio State and the next week you're at Troy. That's scary. I don't like that. Troy's a Sun Belt team and everything. It's not going to affect conference standings, but when me and you are talking about New Year's Six implications, you don't want to drop those two. You don't want to drop back-to-back games. You're probably going to lose to Ohio State, very likely. But we're not gonna go that far and say Western Kentucky and Austin Reed's gonna go in there and slice and dice the Buckeyes up, but you got Troy sandwiched in between Ohio State and MTSU. Like that's a tough game, and dude, I just love Western Kentucky. I think you didn't bring up Malachi Corley. Malachi Corley is also probably the best receiver in the group of five. In our mock draft in the season preview magazine, there are two things I really want to do. One of them, get Riley Leonard in the first round. I cowered it out. I didn't do it. Number two, get Malachi Corley as a first-round draft pick. I made sure I did that. I think I had him to the Chiefs, so of course they had absolute weapon. But
That'd be crazy.
Corley, he says it in his Twitter bio, he's the Yak King. After the catch, there's nobody better in the country than this kid. He is a running back in open space. He has running back background. You can't tackle him. He has way too much juice. He's going to be perfect for what the NFL is looking for. Corley's going to blow up this year, and people really don't know yet, and it stinks because, I mean, I've been trying to talk him up. I know maybe you've been trying to talk him up. Other people have been trying to talk him up. That those that are invested in this level of college football know that Malachi Corley is one of the best receivers in the sport. We put him as a second-team All-American. He is that good. He has Austin Reed throwing him the ball in a pass-happy offense with Drew Hollingshield as their OC now, who comes. He's a son of the air raid. He was working with Mike Leach the past 6 years. He was with Coach Leach. He's worked with Gardner Minshew, Luke Falk, Will Rogers, and now he's got Austin Reed. Don't sleep on Coach. Don't sleep on him, man. He's gonna be Coach Hollingshead is gonna be seeing his name talked about a lot in these next 2 years. I think he's gonna be a hot hire sometime very soon. So I'd look out for Coach Hollingshead. And I mean, there's not enough good things to say about Western Kentucky, and that's their offense is low, but dude, Upton Stout is a tremendous defensive back, and Jacquez Evans we also had as a second-team All-American linebacker / edge rusher, nicknamed Donut Evans. He is tremendous getting after a quarterback and applying pressure and just run defense. The team is just everywhere you look, they are exceptionally talented. Unless we forget what they did in last year's bowl game against South Alabama and cap the year off. That was absolute, utter dominance against South Alabama team that is also one of the best Group 5 teams in the country this year. There returns a lot from that team.
So the reason that I didn't even initially mention Malachi Corley is because I did have him listed as my player to watch in this conference, which isn't surprising. And I had already written down him as my player to watch in the conference, and then I saw a few hours ago you tweeted out a clip of him, and I was like, oh, we're definitely on the same wavelength.
He was also mine, but I feel like it might have been. It was like free space on bingo, man.
I know it's if you don't have him as your number one player to watch out of this conference, then
like a human joystick.
Yeah, it's like I said, it could possibly the best Group of 5 quarterback throwing to him. It's really going to be
he's top really 100%.
Really fun team to watch. And so we're both totally in agreement that they're not only going to win the conference, but are kind of by far the best team in the conference. So as much as we could talk about their offense for forever, we should talk about the other teams in this conference. And one team that I've talked about a bit recently. I tweeted about them a couple of weeks ago after the Pat Fitzgerald Northwestern news, and that's UTEP, because UTEP has Northwestern on their schedule. And I had somebody DM'd me about, oh, like, should we go bet the Northwestern win total? And I had to give that person the bad news that every sports book in the world took down all the Northwestern win totals after that news came out, because obviously not having your head coach changes everything. But I said, if you're looking for something interesting to kind of take advantage of, maybe get ahead of the sports books with the Northwestern news, it would be UTEP, because I think they're a really exciting team. They're kind of go hand in hand with UTSA in those teams that were kind of towards the bottom of, and UTEP even worse, towards the bottom of FBS for a while, and could barely even win a game, and then have had some success in the last couple of years, and fans have really kind of latched onto them. They were really going through like a brutal stretch, and then the last 2 years went 6-6, made a bowl game. They went 5-7 last year. They were a play away from going 6-6 and making another bowl game. So they're a team that I've kind of been rooting for. And now I think they do have a really interesting schedule. They have Gavin Hardison at quarterback, who is really solid, and I think he could take that kind of next step. He's been, I think, solid would be the word that I would use, honestly, but I think he could take another step and become a really good quarterback in this conference. And they do have a really interesting start to the season at Jacksonville State and at home against Incarnate Word. I think should be 2 wins. And then that interesting game that I was kind of talking about, which is at Northwestern week 3. And I think the state of the Northwestern program right now, and honestly how bad the team was going to be before any of this Pat Fitzgerald stuff even happened, I think that's a winnable game for them. And then at Arizona is a really good test. And I think that at Northwestern, at Arizona, back-to-back weeks, even if they don't win either of those games, will be really good for the team. And then they have a couple really winnable games at home against New Mexico State. They have FIU and Sam Houston on the schedule. Middle Tennessee State, I think, is a winnable game for them. UNLV. I really think there are a lot of winnable games on the schedule for this team. And I think I can kind of go ahead, because they're my surprise team that I think could be, again, nobody's beating Western Kentucky, like we said, but I think they're a team that could be really competitive, and they're a team that I took their win total of over 5.5. So I have them as my win total pick and my surprise team from this conference. And I think they're going to be making another bowl game, which is really exciting. Picks up.
Yeah, I was thinking of going with MTSU for my surprise team, but I didn't feel it was flashy enough. I think the top 3 teams in this conference are Western Kentucky, Liberty, and MTSU. I think you could flip-flop MTSU and Liberty if you want. Doesn't matter to me. Surprise team, dude, had to get creative. Louisiana Tech returns over like 70% of snaps on their offensive line. You're in year 2 of the Sonny Cumbie era. You're bringing in Hank Bachmeier. We'll see how that goes. Playing, now it's a dip in competition for him, and his big issue was how many hits he was taking at Boise State. He wasn't good at Boise State, but it was also a product of the system. He was getting hit every single snap. He was fighting for his life. The offensive line let him down all the time. If this is an offensive line, Louisiana Tech, that holds up for him, you might see a renaissance in the Bachmeier career. Marquise Crosby is the best running back in this conference. You're going to be able to depend on him a ton. He's going to have a big year. Have him in my Campus Decanted Fantasy Football League. Stoked to see what he could do. He's got a lot of burst. Absolutely just shoots through the hole. Really fun player to watch as well. I do fear for the defense. I'm not going to gloss over that. I fear for the defense, but at least I know that this is an offense that has good pieces. Maybe Dakotas Crawford shows up this year and balls out for him. You have Smoke Harris, honestly, I just like being honest. Smoke Harris might be a little overrated. I think he's an exceptional return man. I think people overrate him as a straight up receiver. I think he's fine at what he does. I don't think he's game breaker or anything. So I'd like to look for the Coldest to step up or a Cyrus Allen to step up and really help out the receiving room. But I don't know, man. I had to get creative, so I went with Louisiana Tech. You look at their schedule, man. If I use a win, they're gonna lose to SMU. Northwestern State should be a win. North Texas, you could pick off at Nebraska. You never know, I guess, but you're probably not gonna win.
I can tell you now, I'm gonna be betting them against the spread at Nebraska, 100%. They're gonna keep that game close.
In the coldest revenge game.
Yeah,
at UTEP on Friday night, I think you could look at it as a toss-up. Western Kentucky, you're going to lose. Probably going to lose at MTSU. New Mexico State, you could beat at home on Tuesday. Probably lose at Liberty, and then you close with Sam Houston, and then at Jacksonville State. I just feel like there's a lot of very winnable games here for a team with a quarterback that we've seen promise from one of the best running back in the conference, an offensive line that's returning a ton in a solid receiving room. If they could find something on the defense, Sonny Cumbie's second year could look very promising. So Louisiana Tech, I'm going to go with the surprising team. I think 5.5 wins is also an insult. I didn't choose it for my win total, but 5.5 is too low. I think this team should make a bowl game.
yeah, no, I don't think you should feel bad about this pick, because that I was very close to picking that. If I was to pick a different team other than UTEP, they would have been my pick, because I'm a huge Sonny Cumbie believer. I think that taking over from Skip Holtz was a tough gig there, and I think he's going to be able to get a good thing going at Louisiana Tech, and I'm a believer in the team, and yeah, I think they'll probably go as far as Hank Bachmeier goes. Honestly, I think if he can become the guy that he was kind of supposed to be at BYU, then or at Boise State, then I think they could be good. Like you said, the defense is maybe is definitely a concern. But
yeah, they gave up 38 points per game last year. They ranked 130th in rushing yards allowed, 126 in total yards allowed. They averaged 1.3 sacks per game. Like, that unit needs to be fixed. If you look at the results from the 3-9 campaign last year, I mean, they scored 20 at Clemson. Like, good for the offense. Gave up 48, gave up 52 to Mizzou, gave up 38 to South Alabama, 47 to North Texas in a game where they scored 27. Should be a little more competitive. You lose to Rice, who you scored 41 but gave up 42. You gave up 42 to FIU.
That's terrible.
Fix the defense in double OT, albeit, but fix the defense and you could figure something out, man.
Yeah, hopefully some of that you can chalk up to having a first-year head coach and a first-year coordinator, and going into year two, hopefully they get some of that together. But so I kind of already said my win total, because it was the same as my surprise team. So who did you have as your win total pick?
Yeah, it's Western Kentucky over 8.5. It was right. Again, that's too low a number. Me and you both think that this team could very well go 11-1. I think that they are the undisputed best team in the group of 5. I think you put them up against any other team in the group of 5 on neutral field, they're going to win. They're going to beat UTSA. They're going to beat Tulane. They're going to beat SMU. I said it a few minutes ago, like, they'd be the best team in the AAC. You put them against whoever you want from the Sun Belt, South Alabama. They thrashed South Alabama in the bowl game last year. Put them against anytime, anywhere, any place for WKU. This team is different. They have all the pieces they need, an influx of like Hollingshead is such a good hire, and people don't know it yet, man. They lost Arbuckle, replacing him with Hollingshed's incredible. He's going to be a beast for them. That offense, they do so many good things vertically, but also in the East-West game. Like, team is exceptional. I think I didn't want to go too in on this, but one thing that they did very well last year, Western Kentucky, was hitting quick little seam routes. Reed would hit quick little seam routes, like 12 to 15 yards just over the middle of the field, and it killed dudes. It was unstoppable for them, whether it was going to Corley or going to Digwood Davis or going to Joshua Simon. Well, albeit Simon and Daywood aren't there anymore, but they'll reload. It doesn't matter. You put playmakers there, and they're going to do damage. Western Kentucky. If I hate that, if they weren't playing Ohio State, they could have gone 12-0. They really could have.
I know, and I'm excited to watch that game. I mean, it should be, if they can put up some points against Ohio State, it could be
They'll put up
a fun game to watch.
It's not going to be able to stop.
Yeah, there's gonna be a lot of points. Yeah, on the field for sure. So I guess that's it for Conference USA. We're very much on the same page of Western Kentucky rolling through that conference and rolling through their whole schedule. So I guess we'll move on to
player to watch if you want.
Oh yeah.
Go ahead. Malachi. Player to watch. Wait, did you want to give one?
Well, I had Malachi as mine.
You just want to do Malachi? Okay.
Yeah.
Telker Carrasa, MTSU cornerback. Underrated corner. One of the better ones in my opinion in the group of five. I think he's pretty sticky in coverage and just tough to beat. So I'd look out for him. He's going to have a lot of opportunities to go up against good passers in this conference, good passing offenses. So we'll see how he fares.
No, I love that. Yeah, and I love there are a lot of, I think when people think a group of five players that stand out kind of go to offensive players right away, because that's kind of what we've seen in the past is more you'll find like a quarterback or a receiver from these teams that pop. But I mean, we started this whole podcast talking about Khalil Mack. There's a lot of defensive guys on these group of five teams too that are NFL level talents.
Remember Kevin Byard was picking off everything at MTSU, and shockingly, it translated to the NFL.
Yeah,
who would thought?
Believe it or not. But we can move on to everybody's favorite conference, which is the MAC. Like you said, it's exciting that other teams are bringing in weekday games because that's going to be great for college football and great for exposure for those teams. When they could get lost in the shuffle on a Saturday, people will be watching them on weeknights. And the MAC obviously revolutionized that with weeknight action, and it's become one of the best traditions in college football. And should not be any different. This year, the defending champion of the MAC is Toledo, and they are just by barely a bit the favorites to repeat in that conference. But the MAC is always one of the most exciting conferences to talk about, just because I feel like more than any other conference, even in the group of five, you see teams kind of come out of nowhere, not only to compete, but to win this conference. We've seen really long shots come in and get it done. And even teams that you end up looking at who ends up making the MAC championship game. And if you've watched the MAC all year, you're like, these are not the two best teams in this conference, but just the way that this kind of schedule goes, whereas so many teams are kind of on the same level, and these weeknight games where you're going into these weird environments and weird atmospheres, and just crazy stuff happens, and these teams just beat up on each other so much that we see wild stuff happen. But there are also some really good teams. Obviously, we mentioned Ohio and Curtis Rourke, another one of the best quarterbacks in the group of five, Curtis Rourke. The Rourke dynasty at Ohio is awesome. And so I think those are the two best teams on paper, would be Toledo and Ohio. And they're at the top of each division. So theoretically, we could end up seeing those two teams go head to head. But like I said, we've seen crazy things happen in this conference. So kind of what do you see at the top of the conference, and then who's your pick to win the conference?
So as you're talking about, you get to the MAC championship every year, and you really are just like most years. These aren't the two best teams. Last year it was the two best teams, so the best team didn't win. The best team was Ohio with a healthy Curtis Rourke, and they didn't have that because of the injury he suffered against Ball State. If Curtis Rourke never got hurt, Ohio doesn't lose another game that year. They would have beat Toledo, and it's just a tough pill to swallow. It still is. Even as someone who, I came into last season as a doubter of the Bobcats, as a doubter of Mr. Rourke. as a believer in Toledo and a massive Daquan Finn fan. And I came away disappointed last season because I fell in love with Ohio. And I'm going to be very disappointed if Ohio isn't breaking their 53-year MAC championship list curse this fall. I hope that curse ends. This has to be the year for Ohio. We've already kind of talked about it. You have one of the best quarterbacks in the Group 5 in Curtis, or one of the best receivers in the Group 5 in Sam Wiglusz. You have Saya Bangura, who's a stellar running back, who's one of the better ones in the GO5. Torrey Cox Jr. on the defense is an outstanding quarterback. Justin Brichette's a really good player. They have. I was talking to Coach Metz, who works with their tight ends and is very close with their offense, and he was telling me a few things about their team. One of them was he believes that they have two of the best tight ends in the conference, and Tyler Foster and Will Kaepernick. He believes that tight end duo is arguably the best in conference. I would say it's second best. I think it's obviously Bray Hunt and Tanner Koziel at Ball State. I think those are two future NFL guys, but I've been talking to like people well embedded in this Ohio program, and they cannot wait to see the product that they put out this fall. And for those that are doubting Curtis Rourke's health because he left last season with such a catastrophic leg injury, he participated in the spring. They took things cautiously, but it was well ahead of his schedule. He's going to be ready for week 0 at San Diego State. And if something ever goes wrong, they were saying that they are extremely high on CJ Harris and that they won't miss a beat or anything. But you and I both know there will be a drop off. But Curtis ain't getting hurt this year. Curtis Rourke's going to dominate. And I hope I don't sound like a broken record, man. I just can't wait to watch Ohio. And you look at their schedule. I gave them a realistic projection of 9-3. I think you could win week 0 at San Diego State. LIU should be a win at Florida Atlantic. I think it's a toss-up. You're playing Iowa State at home. I don't know about you. Iowa State grosses me out this year. I feel like Ohio could pick them off in like a 23-21 type of ball game. And then when you get into the heart of the match and schedule, man, you just never know what's going to happen. And you have to be able to swim atop to shore and escape the cannibalism. And that's what the great teams in the MAC do. The good teams can't survive that. To be a great team in the MAC, you have to survive the cannibalism. And Ohio could do that. They avoid Toledo in the regular season. That's massive. The big game is Miami of Ohio week 9. I think that game decides who's going to Detroit. But yeah, I'm in love with Ohio's team.
Yeah,
if you couldn't tell.
Yeah, no, and this is one of the teams you actually wrote up for the magazine, right?
Yeah, I only did 2. I only did them in Boise State. I wish I did a few more Sunbelt teams, but can't complain.
Yeah, so I mean, if there's any time to listen to you, it's on this team. You've done the deep dive, and yeah, it's hopefully not boring for people, but for the second conference in a row, we do have the same pick. I'm also taking Ohio to win this conference. I think I'm kind of thinking of Curtis Rourke and Austin Reed kind of in the same way. I think they're both just kind of head and shoulders above the quarterback talent across the rest of their leagues. And I think at the end of the day, that's going to be kind of the difference maker. And you've obviously gone into why this team is so great, but yeah, I mean, I think there's such a good program, and it's really crazy how long it's been since they've won a MAC championship. I think if you took somebody that kind of is into MACtion but might not know these numbers, they would assume that Ohio's probably won a couple MAC championships in the last decade, because they're always really competitive in this conference.
Really? Yeah.
And I mean, Frank Solich was a legend, a college football legend. And I hope if they do win the MAC championship this year, they can somehow get him on the sideline and get him a French fry Gatorade bath and to celebrate, because he deserves it as much as anybody if they end up winning it, because he's a legend, and this is an awesome program. And I do think this is the year that they get it done. I think they, despite this talk we've had about how teams can kind of come out of nowhere in this conference, I think they're just going to be too good for the rest of the teams in their division. And I think
Yeah,
if they
I
can,
think that's the big thing is the division, right?
yeah,
It's not very
yeah,
good.
no, they're definitely have the more favorable route than Toledo in terms of division, and I think they can kind of, even if they aren't, even if they don't reach their full potential, like I just don't see Buffalo or Miami, Ohio being better than them, and after that, it's obviously a huge drop off to Bowling Green, Akron, Kent State. Whereas the
It's
West
like
is yeah is a little more competitive.
yeah, definitely like a 3-horse race in the MAC East, which is good for us Bobcats guys, and that's why they're only plus 265 to win the MAC title. And
Yeah,
then when you look at the West, there's 4 teams that could really win that, and then if a fifth did, if Ball State won it, like I wouldn't be surprised.
no, no. So I think that helps Ohio a lot, and then I think as long as they're healthy going into the MAC championship game, I think they can beat anybody, including Toledo out of the West. I'd be picking Ohio in that game. So, um,
I'm curious, who would be your pick to win the MAC West?
I mean, it would be Toledo, which is a boring answer,
Mm,
obviously.
yeah,
I do think that they're good, and Daquan Finn is, and the problem is, I guess Eastern Michigan is probably the most intriguing team outside of Toledo. I just I do think it would be Toledo, which is a boring answer, but if, like you said, it could be really any of those teams down that list. I do think Eastern Michigan will be an exciting offense. They have some exciting guys, Samson Evans at running back. They have some exciting players that I think, I don't know. I'm looking at their schedule right now. I guess so. This would be my only worry with Eastern Michigan is they have to go to Toledo in week 10 on a Wednesday night. I think that could be really tough. If they lose that game, I think it would be hard to get around that and end up having to win more games than Toledo. Um, so I do think it's going to be Toledo, but do you have a different pick?
I do. It's my surprise team in the MAC.
Oh yeah, let's hear it.
And my win total team now that I look at it. It's over 5.5 wins for Northern Illinois. I'm going to Northern Illinois. Um, it's a team that played like what they had like 4 or 5 guys throw a pass last year. They were hurt, ravaged by quarterback injuries and a never-ending quarterback carousel, and they were still competitive and a lot of games. They still only lost to Miami of Ohio by 6. We'll ignore that they got blown out of Akron. Their season was already over. They were 3-8 at the time of that game. The Central Michigan game was wild. They only lost to Ohio by 7. Like they were in double overtime against Ball State, and they're competitive against Kentucky and Vanderbilt. Like there's still a lot of good pieces from last year's team, and now you're going to have competence at the quarterback position. You would hope, whether it's Rocky Lombardi, who's been in college football since he came out the womb, or Ethan Hampton. You have Ontario Brown, who is going to truly be one of the top breakout running backs at the group of 5 level. And I guess in all college football as a whole, Ontario Brown's going to be an absolute beast. And Thomas Hammock, their head coach, loves to establish the run. So while Harrison Whaley transferred out, Ontario Brown's going to come in, be the number 1 back, and thrive. And then who are they missing all last season? Trayvon Rudolph, the best receiver in the conference now that Cephas and Devontae Walker are gone. Rudolph was the top receiver in the MAC going into last year. He unfortunately never got to play because he tore his ACL. He's back. He's electric. Must see TV. He's quite literally lightning in a bottle. You add that back to your team now, and you should be really excited about this team. And then CJ Brown could be a guy to watch on their defense in the secondary at safety. And to just, oh yeah, they have Gavin Williams too from Iowa that's also in the backfield now. So a nice little 1-2 punch with him in Ontario. And then you look at their schedule. Can they win at Boston College week 1? I know Boston College only favored by 10. I would say, yeah, they can beat Northern Illinois can beat Boston College. You have Southern Illinois who, beat that one FBS program in the Big Ten that shall refuse to be named. Then you're at Nebraska. I see a 2-1 start there, and then beat Tulsa. That's 3-1. I don't think they're going to beat Nebraska. We gotta stop picking on Nebraska with some of these Group of 5 teams going up there and beating them. But I think they could start 3-1, and then you're at Toledo week 5. If you build off that success of a 3-1 start and beat Toledo, you're already in the driver's seat of the wild MAC. So I like Northern Illinois. I think they easily get over 5.5 wins.
No, I like that as a surprise team in the win total. And I mean, we've seen Coach Hammock has had one of those teams that we've talked about where you end up looking at the end of the season and you're like, wait, who won the MAC championship? Like that Northern Illinois team was definitely not the best team in the conference that year, but everything just kind of
always in games. They are always in there. While the scoreboard didn't always reflect that last season, again, the quarterback carousel hurt them. But in 2021, they seemingly won every single one-score game that they were in, and it felt like every single game that they played that year was a one-score game. They're always going to compete. They're always going to be in a game, and the back end of their schedule is pretty favorable with Western Michigan and Kent State should be 2 easy wins.
Yeah, I like that pick. And yeah, like you said, they're always kind of in games and you can always count on them competing. They're not going to be a no-show type of team. But and I don't know why I keep picking these teams as my surprise teams that could just punch me in the face and literally win like no games, like at South Florida. But I'm doing it again, and I'm going with the Akron Zips. This is a team that has been, again, we've talked about some of these teams have been the basement of FBS for forever. The famous Akron UMass game that was the toilet bowl of college football. But this team is really starting to turn things around. Joe Moorhead obviously came in last year. This is going to be year 2 for him. And even last year, no, they weren't good, but you could at least see signs that they had something. They weren't the old Akron anymore. They could at least put some kind of product on the football field. And I think the really exciting thing this year is obviously DJ Irons at quarterback. And he has a couple of weapons. They have a good running back in Clyde Price, and they have some receivers. And I think if there's any year that we see Akron kind of step up, and I don't even want to say make a bowl game, but I do think that they have the potential to really win 4 or 5 games. If everything goes perfect, maybe we see them win that 6th game, and everything would have to go really perfect. But their win total this isn't even my win total pick for this conference, but I also like their win total over 3.5 wins. I do think there are 4 solid wins on their schedule. They're at Temple and against Morgan State at home the first 2 games of the season. They have a couple really tough out of conference games going to Kentucky and Indiana. And although could they compete against Indiana? I don't know. I wouldn't say. I don't know. I hate that Indiana team this year, so maybe. Bowling Green, Central Michigan at home against Kent State. It should be a really down year for Kent State.
Kent State should Akron be awful.
I think Akron could easily win that game at home against Kent State. They really have some games on the schedule that I think they can win. And I think their offense is going to be exciting. And I think if everything can kind of click, they're bringing back a decent amount of experience. And if the defense can be good, I'm confident in their offense and what Moorhead's going to do in year 2. So if things can kind of click on defense, I think they should go over that over 3.5 wins and win 4 or 5 games.
Yeah, I really like that pick, and I like that pick because it's fun to think about Akron actually being good. It's just
I
fun to think
know.
about that. Um, I maybe a bonus pick just because I blurred out that Kent State's going to be awful. Maybe a bonus pick is they're under 2.5, which is just such a just gross number to bet a team to not win 3 games, I suppose. But you'd think that they beat Central Connecticut State in week 3, but there's no other game on their schedule that you look at and say, "Yep, that's a give me." They don't have that. They I don't know 2 other wins that they get. And while we talk about the wild and wacky Mac, this is a team that is going to see serious regression. They underperformed last year, and now they I mean, it's a whole new era that they're going to have to start from scratch from and rebuild. They lost so much talent. They lost 2 NFL receivers. That Dante Cephas went to Penn State, and Devontae Walker went to UNC, and they lost Marquez Cooper, who transfers in conference to Ball State. Like, dude, that team got ravaged by the portal, by the coaching carousel. Their head coach, Sean Lewis, goes and takes a job to bring his flashy, fun, fast offense to Colorado. Like, that team should be terrible. I would seriously look into under 2.5 wins.
No, I don't have a problem with that because that would also probably mean that Akron wins that game, which would be good for me.
Yeah.
So I think Kent State's gonna be terrible. But my actual win total pick was gonna be Buffalo under 6.5 wins. I'm really just not a fan of this Buffalo team. They don't have a lot of experience in the coaching department. They have a first-year offensive coordinator. Their defensive coordinator is the youngest coordinator in all of FBS. And they have a really, really tough schedule, which is really where most of it comes from. I don't think that they're by any means like the worst roster. I think Cole Snyder is a decent quarterback. Marcus Fuqua is maybe one of the most exciting players in this conference, which could easily be the player to watch. So I don't really like hate the team. I I don't think that everything's going to kind of click together for them. And then when it schedules tough, they have probably a gimme game at home against Fordham. Then they have to play Liberty out of conference, which is a really tough game. They have to go to Louisiana for an out of conference game, which is really tough. They have to go to Akron, which, like I've said, I think is a team that is no longer a gimme game in that conference. And yeah, they end the season with this 4-game stretch of at Toledo, Ohio, at Miami, Ohio, and Eastern Michigan. I think it's just a really brutal schedule and a team is a decent team, a decent roster on paper, but I just don't think it's all going to click together. And I think under 6.5 wins is pretty fair.
Yeah, that's an absolute gauntlet that you're ending your season with. And guess what? That's right in the heart of Maction. Those games are on the Tuesday at Toledo, a Tuesday versus Ohio, a Wednesday at Miami of Ohio, and the Tuesday versus Eastern Michigan. Well, Buffalo's lost their last 5 weeknight Maction games. Not great.
No, that's not how you win in this conference.
It's not. And, I think the fun thing about the MAC is truly from top to bottom, there's not another conference in college sports that is more even, that will bring up more parity. It's like I always like comparing the MAC to the NFL in the sense that anything could truly happen. It from year to year. There's always going to be so much progression, but flip-flopping that and turning it into success at times, and one-score games, the coin flip games that we always talk about are always in the NFL. The MAC lives for that. That's what this has each and every season. It's a joy to watch. I like the Buffalo underplay. I really do, because that back end of the schedule is brutal.
Yeah. And so you already gave your win total was the same as your
Yeah.
surprise team, but do you have a player to watch?
Yeah, I'll cheat a bit and I'll say I'll give three guys, I guess. The Brady Hunt Tanner Koziol duo tight end at Ball State is a tight end pairing that every other team in the country would die to have except maybe Georgia. Those and maybe Florida State. Maybe those are two programs that would pass on it because they're already loaded with talent at tight end. Hunt and Koziol are exceptional talents. Hunt's a converted quarterback that is turning into a NFL prospect at tight end right before our eyes. I think Koziel's even better than him, and he doesn't get near as much love. I think Koziel's the better tight end, but both of them are future NFL guys. We'll see it shortly. But the guy I wanted to give the most shine to is Central Michigan's cornerback Dante Kent. If you want to watch a future NFL corner in the MAC, Dante Kent's your guy. Actually, Quinion Mitchell is too, and maybe Torrey Cox Jr. is as well, loaded there in the MAC. But Dante Kent plays with so much physicality. He's an absolute disruptor.
Yeah, I like all of those. And you talking about Florida State tight ends. I'm still not ready to talk about Jaheim Bell as a South Carolina guy, but in terms of my player to watch out of this conference, I also went on the defensive end. I went with Corey Suttle from Miami, Ohio. He's a legit NFL level talent, 6'4", 260. He originally was at Iowa State, and so is that kind of level of recruit, and ended up at Miami. Had kind of a weird year last year where he only ended up starting 4 games, but he had 6 tackles for loss, 6 sacks, forced fumble, and an interception. And I think he's now kind of ready to put all of his talent on display. And I think next year, I think just from a size and athleticism position, I think he's going to give like the offensive lines in the MAC a really hard time. The MAC is definitely not known for having top level offensive line play, so I think having a kind of defensive end freak like that, he's going to give a lot of teams a hard time next year. And then if we see him go in the NFL draft next year, I would not be surprised at all. So it's another guy to watch.
Yeah, I like that shout.